Brew Nation, thank you for watching and listening. Make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, share. I got a pretty interesting topic today, and it's clinical research coordinator beyond the job description. Because if you want to know what a clinical research coordinator actually is, like the actual job description itself and the fundamentals of what they do, I have tons of videos on that. Just go on my playlists channel on YouTube and you'll find that. But this is like the unspoken, beyond the job description type. And like there's a lot of generalities because for the most part, clinical research coordinator is the way I use the term because there's some that are traveling CRCs, there's some that are remote, there's some that are not patient facing, there's some that are regulatory facing. Like I'm talking about most sites in the United States, maybe even in the world, a coordinator is in the office, in the site, patient facing and sponsor facing. And of course, PI facing internally as well with the team. So the first thing that's beyond the job description is ability to effectively communicate between the various stakeholders. Because as the name implies, coordinator, you are coordinating information between various stakeholders. So between the patient and the sponsor, between the PI and the patient, between the patient and the PI, between the PI and the sponsor. You're coordinating all this stuff, not to mention all the other vendors. And you're also a conduit of information and hopefully an asset to your team at the site. So this requires, in case you haven't figured it out, excellent communication skills. And you have to understand how to communicate with all those stakeholders. And you don't communicate the same way to a patient as you would to a sponsor. Now you don't communicate internally to your team the way you would communicate to any of those other stakeholders either. So you have to be able to understand the language when it comes to the industry facing side of your job, but be empathetic when it comes to the patient facing side. And that's not easy. I've ran sites. I've been a site owner and a site director for over 20 years now, if you can believe it. The successful coordinators do this well. And even if they do the other part of their job just at a mediocre level, meaning data entry, query resolution, IP accountability, even if they do that like a mediocre job on that, if they communicate well to these three stakeholders, they're a keeper and they end up being successful in the industry. And the ones that don't, they learn the hard way because they get passed up on opportunities. They get passed up on uh, other roles, I guess, as opportunities. They get passed on outcomes that they probably want for themselves because of this lack of communication, which I know it sounds like complete BS. It sounds like one of these soft skills that nobody actually cares about. Let me tell you, especially now in the era of AI, and we're still in the infancy of AI, communication is going to become more important. AI does not fix stupid. AI does not cure a lack of common sense. And AI cannot communicate on your behalf. And when it does, it's not going to be the same. It's going to lack empathy. It's going to lack some context. It's going to lack the elements that make us human. I want to take a quick side note. They were discovering through some vision tests that humans see visually very differently than AI, even with cameras on all these Teslas and Waymos and all that. Humans perceive motion. Humans there's a contextual uh sensitivity when it comes to any change. Humans are excel. This is an innate feature of humans, is to understand context and to understand nuance and to understand changes. Whereas AI, they understand like holistically the whole picture. They may be able to get all the data inputs, but it's not doesn't equate to necessarily the same meaning or the same degree of meaning, which translates directly into outcomes for our industry. So you got to be a team player, bottom line. Is this a role for introverts? Yes, but you have to also know how to effectively communicate. Can introverts effectively communicate? Yes. And so I've seen from my own staff in the past, lack of communication, even on a small teams, causing major issues. So patient recruitment is a probably the most important example of like beyond job description. You're gonna be asked as a coordinator, cut, let's go to this community health fair. Let's go to this community event. Let's talk to the general public about what we do. You're gonna have to know how to do that. Like the public, the general public has a pretty bad misconception of clinical research. And the most common symbol that the general public has in their brains when it comes to clinical research is guinea pigs. And you have to immediately address this issue head on. And so that requires a good amount of distillation of the information to the community, and it requires someone who's empathetic and understands therapeutic areas. So you may be a coordinator, you may have just gotten hired to be a coordinator, and maybe you were working, well, if you were not working in research at all, you got to learn everything, right? But maybe you were working in psychiatry and now you're doing cardio. Now you're doing cardiology studies. You have a whole new language to learn. You have all new primary endpoints. You have a whole new set of what are considered important or clinically significant lab values. You have a whole new set of assessments. You have a whole new set of what's the golden scale for this study? What's the golden assessment for atrial fibrillation, as an example, where maybe in the past you were just doing depression studies and schizophrenia studies? That requires no longer requires communication. It will eventually require it. It requires you to process this and learn very quickly what's important versus what's not. Because if you get into a new field, I mean, there are people in your field on PubMed writing peer-reviewed journals that are on the cutting edge of your field, but you need to learn at least the basics, like at least the 20% of your therapeutic area that is going to answer 80% of the questions out there and that are going to apply to 80% of the population. So that means current standard of therapy, you're going to have to learn that, right? So that's beyond the job description. No one's going to tell you you have to learn that, but you're going to have to learn that. And this is why a lot of times employers say previous experience required in whatever therapeutic area they're discussing. And that's just the therapeutic area. Now, if you want to get into the actual research side, that's a whole nother language as well. So you have to learn the current standard of therapies so you can become a patient advocate when you're going out there in the communities, or when patients are asking you questions about the consent form, or when a medical monitor maybe is talking to you and your PI is not available and you need to be the conduit of information between the two. So this kind of detective work is gonna eventually translate into data verification, query resolution, proper Alcoa-C documentation guidelines. But you need a base foundation of information, and that's not going to be on the job description. No one's going to pay you to learn that stuff. You just kind of have to figure it out. And now you're going to get to the soft skills. of the job, which is, like I said, communication, explaining the complex clearly to all the different stakeholders, but also problem solving on the fly. So, adapting to unforeseen circumstances with critical thinking. So, let's say a patient's in there right now, you don't have access to a portal, the patient doesn't have all day, the sponsors are not getting back to you. What do? You have to be able to think on the fly. How do I not waste this visit? How do I give the patient a good experience while also not committing protocol deviations? That's critical thinking. That only comes from experience. And Mark Twain had a quote. He said, "Good judgment comes from experience, which comes from bad judgment." So, unfortunately, what that's telling us is you're eventually going to end up with good experience, but it's going to be through bad experiences. There's no way around it. You're gonna have failures, but if you have some level of critical thinking and adaptability, this is why you need that base layer of education. And then emotional intelligence, you're gonna have coworkers you don't like. You're gonna have coworkers that don't like you. You're gonna have people trying to get you in trouble. You're gonna have people trying to blame you. That's just human beings. They fight sometimes. And your own teammates too. It sucks. As a site owner, I've seen this. I've been a contract CRA at times. I've felt this happening to me. Whenever somebody gets in trouble, they want, oh no, well, it's that person's fault, actually. You're going to experience this. The way you navigate that and come out on top versus coming out as someone who's been uh, defeated is the difference between whether you're going to have a stressful experience or not, and whether you're going to stay in this industry or not. And the good thing is the majority of people in this industry stay in this industry. And I'm having a longer podcast later on in the week and an article on my LinkedIn. So if you're not following me on my LinkedIn, make sure you do. If you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, make sure you do, on why coordinators stay coordinators for life and why coordinators leave to pursue other opportunities within research or sometimes outside of research. And you're going to see a lot of these concepts that I've already discussed are reasons for maybe the impetus or the catalyst for why people go and do other things or why they stay. So, emotional intelligence, navigating difficult conversations, sometimes with patience. And oftentimes you're put in these situations when you are relatively new at that organization. We have staff that we just brought on. We train them on using Patient Ace, which is our patient recruitment tool. If you're interested in learning more about Patient Ace, reach out to me. We're a site-centric tool for sites to get patients in their database and screened. On day one, we might put a new hire in charge of Patient Ace. They get yelled at, they get snooty remarks, because this is through text, it's not face to face. So people, the general public, has this misconception about research. It sounds sketchy, it sounds like a fraud, it sounds like potential threat, but I'm still interested, but like, I don't know, I'm gonna be a little hostile. You get that a lot. And so you need to have emotional intelligence and figure out how to navigate these conversations. And that is not something necessarily that someone can train you on. That's something that you have to develop throughout your career. And hopefully, before you got into that role, you have some kind of a foundation for soft skills. Now, this is also the way forward for the future of the industry and the future of CRCs. It's now becoming, shout out to Daniel Perez at Gleam. He put me onto this recently. It's now becoming less of a requirement to have a bachelor's degree in other roles in this industry. It used to always be, hey, if you want to graduate beyond the site level, you need more advanced degrees. And I think that's still the mainly the rule, but it's starting to get bent more and more, and we're starting to slowly chip away at that rule, which has been a sacred cow. And it's starting to, over the next decades or so, probably be less important. But what's going to be more important than that? Experience and just harken back to the Mark Twain quote about where good judgment comes from. And that's the way forward for you beyond CRC. You want to work at a tech vendor, then it's never been better opportunities. You want to work at a sponsor or a biotech, you want to own your own site, you better look at this job as way beyond your job description. This should be a springboard to the rest of your career. So that's the advice I have for aspiring coordinators or people that are currently coordinators. This is a very satisfying job. This is a very interesting job. It's as interesting as you want to make it. Because if you don't want to get into the innovative side of the industry, if you just want to, hey, site selection visit, screening visit, randomization, completion visit, next study, same thing over and over again, and you like to have processes and things like that, that's cool too. But if you want to actually learn about the next medical breakthroughs, no one's stopping you from reading the investigator's brochure. No one's stopping you from going on PubMed and searching that investigational product and seeing all the literature available on it. No one's stopping you from taking all that information and going to Gemini or Grok or some other AI and doing a deep thinking research on that investigational product so that you can then speak, you can first understand more intelligently what it is you're doing so you understand the why behind the way these studies are designed, and then you can communicate that more effectively to your patients as well as to the other stakeholders. No one's stopping you from doing that. But at the same time, it's very rare anyone's going to be asking you to do that. I do ask a few coordinators that I've hired currently to do just this because I know that for them, this particular person has an international medical graduate. I know that for this person, it's going to directly benefit their future by being able to do this stuff now. And I give that opportunity to all the staff, but I don't force them to do it because again, it's not my career, it's theirs, it's my company, but I don't need all of them to be doing that. If one or two does it, that's great. The rest, put your head down and do your job. That's fine too. But if you're watching and if you're listening, something tells me that you're thinking beyond just the daily grind. You're thinking more about what it is for your future and opportunities for you, and to always be climbing Jacob's ladder and going higher and pointing, fixing your aim, and then raising to new levels in your career and in your opportunities. That's it. Don't want to get too poetic. I'm going to have a longer video on the why behind why coordinators stay or leave. Has a lot to do with what I discussed, but I'll go more in depth. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Take care. Bye bye.